Yeah, this talk is also about peer discovery, so it's pretty convenient. It's joint work with Constantine and Aviv. So we actually set out to redesign the peer discovery layer with more robust guarantees. So let me briefly motivate that. So as Lioba mentioned, peer discovery is the problem of maintaining a table of known peers. And in this process, we have to constantly update this table in some predetermined protocol in order to keep it fresh, because nodes join and leave, IP addresses rotate out. And the key adversary we are scared about is actually the Sybil attack. And there are basically no guarantees in this network layer. So in particular, if I'm the attacker, I can one day show up with 10,000 nodes and join the system. And in many of these networks, given enough time, as churn rotates out other peers, I can become a large portion of the network and hence the peer tables. So as you can see in this figure, for example, I can completely eclipse an honest node. An honest node may be connected to just the adversary without being aware of it. Therefore, all kinds of attacks are possible. Other issues also include like denial of service, spamming IP records, and also generally like this kind of adversary can really hurt the privacy of the network by observing other people's peer tables and their traffic. So what can we do about Sybil attacks then? We actually already solved Sybil attacks at the consensus layer by introducing stake. So our idea is to say, okay, why not use the blockchain paradigm? Let's substitute stake for identity. So the act of over-representing yourself in the network is going to be prohibitively expensive. And here's a quick outline of the AetherWeave protocol that we propose. We are going to enable formation of robust, well-connected networks, and I'm going to make that formal in a second. We are going to detect eclipse and partition attacks in cases where they happen. And we are also going to prevent spam by budgeting the number of requests you can make in this robust networking layer. And in doing so, we are going to keep privacy. So we'll decouple the network identity from stake identity. So everyone's going to be able to prove that they own stake without revealing which specific stake they own. And we are also going to strive for efficiency. So everything's going to be off-chain except depositing and slashing. And also we'll try to keep communication to sublinear per node. And we also advocate implementing something like this on top of the existing peer discovery stack, because it can only add to maintain a robust stake table. You can still keep serving non-staked entities as usual using protocols that we currently do with like DHTs and gossiping. Okay, so let's first go over the identities and how we generate them. So as you can see, we start with a master secret, and on one branch, we are going to derive the network identities. And the network identities are essentially what you know about other people in the system. And on the right, there's an example peer table where you can see the network public key and the IP address is signed together with a zero-knowledge proof. And on the lower branch, you can see that there's a stake ID, which is staked on-chain using some sort of smart contract. And we'll link these two using a zero-knowledge proof. And we'll use the standard assumption of an adversary who controls alpha percentage of the stake. So the core part of our protocol, which we call the heartbeat, is going to run every round of fixed durations. And in every round, you're essentially sampling a fresh nonce that subsamples a subset of the entire staked nodes. So you can think of it as like S square root n nodes that we sample from the set of staked entities, where S is some constant. And once I sample some slice, I may or may not have everyone in my slice currently in my table. So I reach out to my table peers, like current peers, to request this slice of identities. And if they have it, they send them back. So in a way, we are doing this structured shuffling of everyone's peer tables. And once we get the request back, it will be like a bunch of records. We'll just validate them by checking that they are in our slice, that they are staked, and they're signed relatively recently, so the IP is up to date. One observation, because we uniformly randomly sample this slice, the attacker can't actually overrepresent themselves in the slice. An alpha adversary only in expectation gets alpha fraction of this slice. And because we are requesting from like square root many nodes of a slice of size square root n, we are going to get good redundancy. So any single record, we'll expect to get it from a couple sources. Okay, so here's some intuition for how this process evolves. So if you do a mean field analysis, you can see that it's actually sort of an epidemic process where everyone's peer is a contagion that propagates across the network. And as is usual in the epidemic analyses, we can compute the R0 and see what threshold we need for these parameters. So we see that if we set S, the constant, to something like decent, like 4, we get good coverage. And if you solve the mean field equations, you see that actually each with a sufficiently high chosen S, we see that the tables quickly reach the good case of S square root n fresh nodes. And each node is going to obtain nearly all of its slice, even in the presence of some adversary. So let's make that even more formal. So the overarching goal in peer discovery is actually to sample and overlay. So from my table, I'm actually going to make some connections. So suppose I make these connections with some fixed probability. And there's some threshold that I set such that if I don't get too many nodes in my slice, let's say like maybe I get like less than 70%, then that's an indication of a bad scenario because the adversary might be filtering. So in that case, I'm going to raise a red flag. So given that setup, even in the presence of an extremely powerful adversary that controls alpha fraction of the stake and knows everyone's private seeds that they sampled uniformly randomly, and is able to even determine the contents of the peer tables, we are actually going to be able to say with high probability, either in this sampling process, everything is connected, so there's no partitioning or eclipsing, or for some given cut A and B, there's going to be a partition, and the small side is going to detect it. Okay, so let's move on to the spam and slashing part. So one thing we are concerned about is sending too many requests in this heartbeat process. So we're just going to budget them. Because everyone's table is about S square root n, I'm just going to limit them to S square root n requests per round. So how can we do this? One way to do this naively is to just use secret sharing. They have to secret share for each request they make. And if they make more than S square root n shares, they are going to combine to reveal their stake secret, which we can use to de-anonymize and slash them. We take this one step further by batching them. So every node is going to commit to a set of S size S square root n. And then each recipient is going to check that they are in this commitment. And the nodes are required to include a share that needs to be well-formed, proven by a ZK argument. And then this share is just going to reveal, in the case that you send to two different sets in a given round, the stake secret. So this will limit you to S square root n requests per round. Okay, the second challenge in slashing is actually propagating these shares. Because the question is, okay, on one hand, I committed to this set and spammed them. On the other hand, I committed to this other set and spammed them. Now I'm doing too many requests, but how can they combine the shares to slash me? And our solution to this is to just piggyback on record propagation. We already have this robust record propagation mechanism, why not add the shares on top of that too? And in our experiments, we see that you don't even have to wait one round for this to hit. Within the round, with high probability, we are able to slash anyone who violates this bound. Okay, so let's discuss privacy a bit too. So far, we were only talking about one table. But actually, we recommend using two tables. One for constructing your connections from, which we call the overlay table. That you keep secret, and you only request records for that, and then receive them and form that table and maintain it. You do the exact copy of that as the peer table, which you also use to further serve other people's requests. So now we are running two instances of the AetherWeave protocol to keep privacy of what table you're sampling your connections from. And in this world, what we do is we have two uniformly random samples from the stake distribution represented by two different nonces. We send them to our peers. They respond back with the matches in our slice, and we add them to our table. On top of this, you can actually do a more private thing where you don't even reveal what subset of the stake distribution you are requesting. And for this, one thing you can implement is just you request the entire table and do the filtration on your own side locally. But this will cost extra communication. An alternative to that is to do something like PIR, or for example, with a TEE, you can send the encrypted version of the nonces, and then a TEE can reply with an encrypted version of what matches your slice without learning what subset of the stake distribution you were requesting. Okay, so one thing we did on top of this after designing the protocol was to implement an event-based simulator where up to 10,000 nodes we simulated executions of this protocol. So on plot A on the left side, you can see that the moment we are bootstrapping and joining an existing network, we actually, within a couple of rounds, quickly reach the desired S²N size of the table. On the middle plot, you can see that actually even with certain amounts of churn in IPs where we randomly pick nodes to change their IP in the simulation, we are able to still maintain high accuracy in our tables. And on C, you can see that even in the presence of churn and a high fraction of the nodes not participating in the protocol, so think of an adversary who refuses to serve requests, we are still able to tolerate and reach most of our tables, further adding to the redundancy claim. And lastly, in the presence of an adversary that, say, filters the request, so they only respond back with adversarial nodes, even when we reach 60, 70% adversaries, we are still able to keep robustness because we are sampling our own table uniformly randomly. So after simulating it and getting the plots, we also set out to implement a research-grade prototype for Ethereum. So we forked Prism and Ethereum client and their libp2p stack. And we implemented the zero-knowledge proofs in Circom. And we also implemented a smart contract in Solidity. So the one-time gas costs of the smart contract are decent. And when we do the measurements of the compute, we see that actually this doesn't cost too much extra effort. And already, given how other parts of the stack are compute intensive, this only adds a very small overhead on top of the existing peer discovery implementation. Yeah, and that pretty much concludes my talk. Just to recap, we use Staked to get us to a protocol that has very robust guarantees in terms of the connections you're able to get. We advocate implementing this on top of the existing peer discovery stack, so the staked entities can form a table that they trust more than the current world. And we did this while preventing the attackers from over-representing themselves and in a communication-efficient manner while limiting spam and any privacy violation. On the right side, you can see that there are QR codes for one blog post on Aviv's website that you can check out. And we also have the paper on archive. Thank you.
OK, please line up to the microphones for questions. Let me start with one question, which is, you implemented this for Ethereum. Do you see any way forward to do a soft fork to adopt this? Or can some nodes maybe selectively adopt this without the whole network adopting it and without a hard fork? And they can maybe reap some partial benefits?
Yeah, definitely. I think one nice thing about the network layer is you can implement most of this stuff without requiring a hard fork on the consensus layer. So you can actually even build this on top of Ethereum via a smart contract for another peer-to-peer network. So I think we have a lot of flexibility in experimentation and trial in that process.
OK, and then one more question that I have is, I guess one of your spiritual predecessors is the Scuttlebutt paper. Do you want to say a few words about what you're extending here? How does it differ? What was the inspiration?
Yeah. The Scuttlebutt paper was pretty useful because it gave us the idea that actually there's this robust Sybil resistance mechanism that uses stake and the consensus layer. Why not use it at the networking layer too? So when we read the paper, we were very curious to think about OK, how do we actually implement this in practice? So I would position our work a bit more closer to the practical side and saying, OK, the Scuttlebutt paper gave us this very nice idea of constructing these highly connected graphs. This is one thing that you can use to implement that.
OK, let's thank the speaker again.